You are listening to the Unusually Well-Informed podcast.
Welcome to the Unusually Well-Informed podcast. I'm your host, Tim Hampton. My unusually well-informed guest today is Jared Thatcher. Jared is a lean transformation business consultant. He is currently a continuous process improvement program manager at the Port of Seattle. He is also on the advisory board of the design thinking program at the Tambolo Institute at Bellevue College. Jared is the founder of the Virtual Lean Summit, an online event helping leaders build problem discovery and solving skills. Today, Jared and I are discussing his book titled Parenting the Lean Way. Jared, welcome to the show.
Tim, thank you for having me. Really,
my pleasure. So before we talk about your book titled Parenting the Lean Way, let's first explore lean itself a little bit. How does the glass half full versus glass half empty debate illustrate lean principles?
I think that's a great example. So there's a cartoon from that, but a lot of people are going to be worried about are they seen as being too pessimistic or too optimistic? With that question, really somebody with a lean background will look at that a little bit differently. Between my wife and I, my son says that while we're busy arguing, he's going to go ahead and drink the water because he's an opportunist. But for somebody who's lean, they're going to look at that and they're going to think a couple of things. First off, they're going to say, well, that's probably the wrong size glass if you only need half a cup of water. The next question might be, well, wait a second, maybe I'm presuming. So, did you mean to fill it halfway? Or is there something wrong with maybe the filter? So I know with my fridge, every so often I have to change the filter. Otherwise, it takes forever to fill it. I get bored. And so I'll just, do it halfway where I may have wanted a full glass, right? So that they'll start to actually diagnose, problems or issues. They might want to know, what temperature do you want? Because they're going to ask questions, the customer, the person that is needing it. Did you really want water? Did you want something else? Maybe a hard day, you need some vodka, I don't know. But, you're going to ask different questions. And of course, if it's a glass that you can see whether it's, half full or half empty, and they want to make tea out of it, that's the wrong type of glass. You're going to need a mug, right? So somebody who has kind of this lean thinking, they go beyond just, is it half full, is it half empty? And they start to ask questions. And really, I think that's what lean's all about, is trying to understand things from the perspective of your customer, of the people you're serving.
Terrific. Okay. So what is the relationship between the Toyota production system and lean?
Okay. So that's also another great history question. So Toyota after World War II, actually all of Japan after World War II, we completely decimated their manufacturing capabilities. And as part of the rebuilding effort under MacArthur, they went ahead and brought over a bunch of industry experts from around the country. And so they introduced concepts, TWI, training within industry. They introduced a whole bunch of different perspectives. And as Toyota heard these things and started looking at it, they realized that there was something there. There was something they could do to improve their production. And I think it was early in the 1950s, shortly after the war, that they went and took a tour of Ford and came up with a bunch of realizations. Number one, Ford was producing in a day what Toyota was producing in a year. And they had, the top-notch, machines. They had all of these things that Toyota did not have. And so what they decided is, we want to go ahead, and it was really a big, hairy, audacious goal. We want to go ahead and try to equal the production of Ford. And, we don't want to do that in a couple of decades. We want to do that within a few years. And it was like, wow. So how do we do that if we don't have the equipment? If we don't have, the money to be able to afford that equipment? And so really, that was kind of a challenge that was given to Taiichi Ohno. He was one of the plant managers. And then really, I've heard the Toyota production system, or TPS, also referred to as kind of the poor man's production system. And really what that means is they looked at things not as, hey, we can increase production by getting something that's more expensive, but how can we increase production by eliminating the waste that goes into a system? And so one of the things that he noticed is that there is a lot of waste that actually happens. You talk about changing dyes or changing, stamping methods that could take upwards of a day and a half to go ahead and shift that out, so that you go from stamping doors to stamping the hood of a car. And with Taichi Ono, with Shige Shingo, with a bunch of the people that were there at the time, they came up with ways to reduce that from days down to hours, and then down to minutes. And today, it's they're looking at trying to get perfection in terms of, hey, can we shave off another tenth of a second? So they're constantly working on it. And so I think that's one of the things, is they've empowered their people to look for opportunities to do it better, to do it quicker, to do it safer, and more importantly, to increase the quality of what you're doing. And so really, it was just all of these little things that they used, really commonsensical, to go ahead and figure out, how do we go ahead and improve the production? And a lot of that came about in figuring out how to reduce the waste that is in the system. And by doing that, they really surprised the entire world by, in the 1950s and 60s, Toyota was considered junk, right? It was just cheap car, that was it. By the 1970s, in fact, my first car, my parents bought just before I was born. I inherited it, but it was a Toyota Corona 2000. And
amazing. My parents had a Corona too.
Yeah, it was great, right? It's not the beer, it's the car. Yeah. And that thing, that ran for, easily, 25 years or so. We got rid of it about the time I would say we got rid of it about when I was 20. They bought it just before I was born. So they had it for 21 years. The car ran great. And it was a cheap car. And my dad did the research and, said, the quality on this thing is incredible. And for the price, it can't be beat. So he got that car. And all of a sudden, here in the 70s, attitudes started changing. It's no longer a junk car. It's no longer cheap. It's cheap, but it's affordable. But not cheap, I guess is probably a better way to say it. And so as they looked at that, and all of a sudden, 1980s come around, and Toyota just blew away the car industry here in the United States, that thought that they had, everything sewn up, that, we're the best, and that's it. They came in, they're doing it cheaper. They're having less errors in their production. And so really, Toyota kind of created what's known as lean. And from that, all sorts of different industries, started manufacturing. It's gone from manufacturing out to, healthcare, into the office side of things. It's going into construction. There's a big push right now for, lean construction. Yeah. And so there's all these different industries that realize, hey, these principles, it doesn't apply just to manufacturing, it applies to everything. And so we can always improve and make things better. So that's where we're at today.
Yeah. So your book is titled Parenting the Lean Way. What inspired you to connect what's usually viewed as a manufacturing or a business process to parenting?
My wife. It's that simple. So I came home. So after I got my MBA from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, came back to the States. I figured, what better place to study international business than internationally. So when I came back to the States, I got a job. Official title, I think at the time, was Mexico Sourcing Coordinator. So I was working with our production plants down in Mexico, as well as with our suppliers there, as well as here. And so it was exactly the type of thing I'd studied for. It was, going ahead and applying, international negotiations, international, trade, all of those sort of things. And one of the things that I was responsible for was really kind of the continuous cost improvement. So I was part of what Daimler calls the CCI group, so continuous cost improvement, and had a lot of lean principles in that. And I was familiar with it from, both before I went off to get my MBA, as well as during my MBA. But a little bit after I started work there, and after working in that team, I was put into a special group that was working with McKinsey Consulting to roll lean out into the indirect side, or the office side of the company. So, Daimler had been using lean in the manufacturing side for a number of years. And now we had the opportunity to go ahead and use it in the office. And they felt that this was really important for, even like HR or IT, or you name the group, to really understand the principles of lean and then apply it to their own organization. And so that's what I was doing. I was coming home. I was really excited about all these things we were doing, things I was learning from McKinsey, things that, I was seeing happening in the group that I was working with as we were rolling out, department by department. And I'd come home and just like super excited, telling my wife about all these things that were happening. And one day, long story short, I come home and my wife is there at the door with her hands on her hip. And that is never a good time, ever. So as I'm quickly, going, okay, crap, it's not our anniversary. It's not a birthday. I'm going through the list of things. What in the heck did I forget? She asked me to get something from the store. No, I don't remember that. So I think I'm okay. As we go through that, or as I was going through that, she relieved me by saying, I have just had a terrible day with the kids. The boys have been fighting. At the time, we just had our one daughter who was like probably 2 or 3 at the time. She's a little Tasmanian devil, had pulled all of the toys, all of the books down, spread it around the entire house. It was just like a cyclone had gone through the house. And she said to me, why can't you take the things you learned in your MBA and the things that you're doing at work and apply those to help the family? And instantly I had this Venn diagram show up in my mind, and it came crashing together because I had always kept work separate from home. So it's like when I'm at home, here's the stuff I'm doing. When I'm at work, here's the stuff I'm doing. And I quickly realized that there are so many things that we do at work that have a real, impact on what we do at home too. And so that's kind of what started it. Clearly, being a guy, I missed the big clue that my wife was trying to give me, which was like, hey, can you help out a little more around the house? And,
Sure.
so stressed. What I'm thinking is, why can't I take these things? Okay, so you're wanting me to create a parenting course around, lean and the stuff I'm doing here. So that's not what she meant, but she is very glad that I went through it at times.
Well, so that does, one of the things you point out in the book is that home can be more stressful than work. And I suspect it's because we don't apply a lot of these ideas that we have at work. Is that sort of where you were headed, that maybe if you connected the ideas that were creating order and engagement at work might work at home?
A little bit. I don't know if you can hear it, but the doors are slamming in and out, even though I told her, hey, I'm going to be recording. Yeah, don't listen to Dad.
Yeah, we were talking off air about the possibility that your kids would betray you at this point. So
that's right. It's all good. But no, it's a great point that you make. So I had this realization, and in fact, my wife and I were talking about it, and I dropped our daughter off at Montessori preschool, and there was this mom. As I was going in, she's towing like 3 kids, dropping them off, and she's practically just like in tears, like just the amount of energy it probably took to get those kids dressed and out the door, and she's dropping them off, and then she's like under her breath muttering to herself and just like, I can't wait to get to work. And that got me thinking. It's like, oh yeah, well, why is that? Shouldn't you enjoy this time with your kids? Because
Yeah.
They really do. Our oldest son just got married not too long ago.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Of course, now we have the 3.5-year-old, so we're going to be at this for a while. But that said, they grow up quick. And the thing that I kind of came up with after hearing this woman just so stressed and can't wait to get to work. At work, we have systems. At work, we have some semblance of order usually, and at home we don't have that. It's usually very chaotic. Not always. I have been to friends' homes that were in the military, right? So they're very regimented. There's a set time, going to bed, washing your teeth, brushing your teeth, washing, getting ready for bed. That's all regimented out. They know exactly, that clock just done, or, ding, ding, ding. Okay, time to go. But for me, I wasn't military. I don't have that, type of background, and I'm a little bit more, kind of go with the flow type of person. So to say that there were not systems in place at our house, that would be a vast understatement.
Well, you say that the power of lean comes from empowering workers to solve problems and issues when they see them.
Yeah.
In this respect, it's quite egalitarian. It assumes that everybody has the means to shape their contribution. How does this connect with our kids' desire for independence?
Yeah, wow, that's a really good question. In my trainings at work, when I'm training people with lean and teach them some of the basic principles and concepts, I ask a question as part of the icebreaker at the beginning, and that question is, share with everybody what is that one thing, or something that just you're most proud of, right? It could be work, could be at home, whatever. And 9 times out of 10, the thing that they share is something where they were given a challenge. They ended up not knowing how to do it, but they figured it out. Mm-hmm. And they felt really good because there was some sort of tangible result that came from that. And even when they talk about their family or whatever, it's something. I didn't know how to be a parent. Ended up figuring it out. Some good things, some bad things. So where that comes back to that is when we empower the workers, or when we empower our kids to make decisions and to do things, that's really where we end up seeing some huge growth opportunities. That's when they feel empowered. That's when they feel like they can accomplish things. And so one of the jobs that we have as parents is, not sure if you're familiar with it, but situational leadership. Have you run across that with Ken Blanchard's model?
No, I mean, the words together make sense, but maybe you can outline what that means.
Yeah, so it's basically, it kind of follows, it almost looks like a horseshoe, but it follows different quadrants, and it goes into how you manage your people as a leader. Mm-hmm. And it also couples how the people that you manage are, do they have the competency, or do they have the eagerness or willingness to do the task, or are they apprehensive about doing the task? And so depending on all of those different factors, you are going to manage a little bit differently, right? So if somebody just comes into the organization fresh out of high school or college, they don't know how to do anything, you're going to have to spend a lot of time kind of coaching them, mentoring them, showing them, demonstrating, and then having them do it, and then watching them and then say, okay, yeah, that's right. Kind of starting to give them a little bit of freedom to do it. As they start to feel more confident in it, they do really well, they do great. And then so you're going to shift. You're not going to have to show them or micromanage them, right? And then at a certain point, then they're going to start realizing, oh, I thought I understood it all, but now there's all this other stuff I don't know. And so they're going to get a little bit worried, right? So you have to kind of coach them in a different way. Say, no, you do have these skills. See, you can do this next thing. And eventually they're going to be, self-sufficient. So at the very end, you don't have to go ahead and, really do anything more than just give them the task, tell them what you need accomplished. They go off and do it. And, you might have to coach them a little bit on making sure they're transparent in the feedback on the process of what they're doing. You know that they'll get it done. You just want to make sure that it's being done.
Right.
So depending on where the worker is, depending on where you are, this is kind of you need to manage differently for the individual. The same thing applies to kids, really. The first couple of years, you are literally trying to keep them alive. That's
against their best efforts.
Yeah. So like, my 3.5-year-old, we've just moved into this nice cul-de-sac. It's not quite a dead end street, but it's kind of a little, loop. So not a lot of cars drive, back and forth. And when they do, they're generally driving, pretty slow. So a lot of the kids here just zoom out into the street without really even looking. So we're trying to no, you cannot go out into the street unless your sister's taking you across or a parent is taking you across. But now she's seen all these other kids doing it. So I can do it. And it's like, no, there's a reason for that, because you're not looking both ways. You haven't quite mastered those tasks yet. So, really until they're like 5 or 6, I'm terrified that, they're going to run out into the street, right? Chase the ball and oops. So it's those sort of things that we have to, talk to them and make sure, constantly watch them, make sure that they're being, safe in what they're doing. that they're not going to hide in a fridge, like when we were kids, they self-locking fridges, right? Thank goodness they got rid of those. But those, we don't think about those things as kids, right? So our job is to keep them alive. The problem is some parents are so used to watching them and taking care of them, they don't change their situational awareness, right? They don't change their situational leadership in terms of helping the children. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is produce children that are self-sufficient, right? They can go out and tackle the world. And so that's what we're trying to do. And if we don't give them the opportunity to fail, if we're a helicopter parent and doing everything for them, then we're not giving them the growth opportunity that they need. And part of, I think, rebellion comes about because they aren't given that freedom, and they say, "Oh, well, I want that, so I'm going to do what I can." And they're going to fight against you. So it's, I don't know, especially when they get to become teenagers.
Yeah, tell me
all together. All rules are off. It's just. But the point is, you can't continue to treat them like you did when they were 5, when they're 15.
Yeah.
If you do, you're going to have some huge issues that arise, and so not good, not good.
So there is a connection that you raised in the book between our tendency to micromanage at work and helicopter parenting, this idea that we hover over our kids all the time. And Lean has a response to that. Lean offers ways for the manager to sort of, recognize that that's not productive, and ways to get the best out of the people in the company. Can you get into that a little bit? What does Lean have to say about that? Sure.
So there's really, in my view, there's kind of like 4 main principles with Lean, right? The first one is respect the individual. And now that wasn't always, in the books and in the literature, kind of spelled out. But really, I think that is at the core of what makes Toyota different, because they allow people to go ahead and make mistakes. And they recognize that if they're making mistakes, it's because we don't have a good system in place.
Right.
And I love the story that Katie Anderson, tells in the book that she, wrote about Mr. Yoshino, right? Where early in his career, his job as this supervisor was to go ahead and supervise the different colored paint and pigments going into the mixer, and so that it could be sprayed onto the cars.
This is a hard problem to hide, I imagine.
Yeah. So when all of a sudden they start noticing, halfway down the line that the paint is peeling off of the cars, clearly something is wrong, and that's his responsibility. What happened is he accidentally put too much. He mistook one of the containers that had a thinner in it. And you're supposed to add a certain amount, but the labels very similar. They were very, the kanji characters, the Chinese characters were very similar as well. Anyway, so the manager comes and is, I don't want to say it. He's not upset, but he's like, clearly we've got 100 cars here that we're going to have to redo. We've got to completely, flush out the system with, this messed up, paint mixture you've made. You can tell he's not happy, right? Sure. And so he's like, oh crap, I'm going to lose my job. And so he says, well, show me what happened. And so he shows what happened. And the manager, get this, apologizes to him for not setting him up for success. I see how you made that mistake. We should have thought of that. I'm sorry that we didn't, we set you up for failure because we didn't make that clear that this and this are very similar. We should have made it completely different so that you couldn't mistake those two. And he's like, you're apologizing to me for the mistake I made. Are you kidding me? Yeah. And that really is that, respecting the individual, right? Not micromanaging them, not coming in there and hammering them. We teach really the principle that we want to be hard on the process, but easy on the people.
I like that a lot.
Good. So that's really, I think, where Lean really comes to play here is people make mistakes. Now, the question is, did he learn from it? Yeah. Is he ever going to make that mistake again? No. Now, if he does, okay, then maybe there's another issue going on, and we can probably, talk about maybe, getting rid of the individual from a work situation. But, I think all too often people will go ahead and make the mistake of ripping into somebody for a mistake that they made. Ultimately, and this is something I learned early in my career, if somebody made a mistake, it's probably because I gave them poor directions. So they followed my directions exactly, not what I meant this, but
they were ambiguous. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to be able to go ahead and work with people, understand that people do make mistakes. And this is something that's a little bit different in manufacturing. Manufacturing, it's, I've got this widget. I need to screw this widget on in this place all the time. This is what I do. Okay. It's, that's a little bit, I don't know to say rote, but it's a system that's easy to follow.
Right.
The things that we do in the office side, the things that we do in like, medical practices, the things that we do, sometimes in construction, although that's a little bit more like manufacturing, but it's not always the same way twice. And so especially with the family, right? It's never
with kids. Yeah, exactly.
So, a lot of people will go, oh, well, this doesn't work. But I think the overlying principle here is that it does, is we have to go ahead and set up our kids for success. And that is, as they're ready, sometimes maybe we're not ready for that, but as they're ready, we need to start giving them a little bit more freedom to make their own decisions. We need to give them the opportunity to make a mistake, to fail. And it's kind of like anyone that has a kid knows this. When the baby's first learning to walk, they're going to fall a lot.
Yeah.
When they fall, they're going to bump their head. They're going to crash into things. They're going to get hurt. And half the time they look to you to see if they should be worried about what just happened, right? So if you go, or if you make a like, oh, are you okay? Then they'll start crying.
Yeah.
If you say, you're fine, they'll go, oh, okay. And they'll get up and and it's completely, you have to learn to like hold back the fear and the apprehension of just, oh crap, that's going to leave a bruise, and just kind of wait to see, are they going to react? Do they feel hurt? Okay, great. Then I'll go comfort them. If not, you're okay. That's parenting, right? And we make mistakes and they make mistakes. And at the end, hopefully we don't become too dysfunctional that we need a therapist for the rest of our life.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so there's a couple of threads in there. One is, I think there's a principle in Lean that describes why the Drano bottle doesn't look like the Gatorade bottle. And that is probably one of the things you'd look at if somebody's pouring the wrong solvent into the paint, right? Is you want to make it really unequivocal which one's which. Is that a Lean idea? It
is a Lean idea. The Japanese word is popioke. It's kind of idiot proofing it. it's mistake proofing it, right? So you think about it, your USB port. That is a system of that where you can only plug it in one direction.
Right.
Plug it in upside down, it won't work. There's only one way that can go in. And so it's so that you don't make a mistake. And there's a lot of things like that are meant to prevent errors and mistakes from happening. Even at the gas station, I'm assuming Canada is probably the same way, but
yep.
The nozzle for the diesel is a little bit thicker than for the gas car.
Right.
So that you can't accidentally put diesel into your gas vehicle. Doesn't mean you can't make the mistake the other direction.
I know somebody who has. Yeah.
Yeah. So in high school, we had a school truck. And I was one of the people that was allowed to drive that because I was part of a building construction class where we would get out for 3 periods a day to actually build a house from start to finish. And by the end of the year, we sold the house as a class. And then the money that we generated off of that, we would buy additional properties and use that money to, build the next year's class, house for the next class. So it was a program. But I was one of the, supervisors that got to drive the vehicle to go pick up stuff from the local hardware store. And over the weekend, they had changed the gas pump to be diesel. And I don't know why they did that, but they did. So the place that we went and fueled up, they had done that. They had not yet put the stickers on there to detail that. And they did not bother, I guess they had a meeting with all of the bus drivers, so the bus drivers knew, but me coming into to that did not know. fill up the gas tank with diesel, and I got about 2.5 blocks before all of a sudden that didn't work. So, yeah.
Back in the day, was that easier to fix, or were the injectors ruined, or?
I don't know. It was the same sort of thing. I didn't get in trouble because it was like, clearly it was their mistake. They did not label it. They did not, let anybody know that, hey, this had happened. And so, no, I was fine. But no, yeah, I think it was in the shop for maybe a week or two.
Oh wow, okay.
It wasn't too bad.
So the other thing about the point you raised with the paint thinner, or whatever it was, the problem with the paint, is that, of course, you are not just a manager, but you're creating managers to follow, right? Which is one of the great things about this idea of lean parenting. You're creating hopefully kids that will be great parents at someday. So I think that's really exciting. One of the principles you raise in the book is the importance of mission or purpose. And you use the bricklayer story. And so how does this impact how we frame the contributions our children make to the family?
Great one. So, probably quickly tell that story.
Yes,
so
please.
It's one you probably all heard it before, but guy's walking by, he sees some construction going on, and in the neighborhood, doesn't know what it is. So he goes up to the first construction worker and say, "Hey, what's going on?" He goes, "I don't know. I'm just it's almost 5 o'clock. I'm just about out of here. Yeah. I don't know what I'm just following the directions." Okay, that doesn't tell me what I want to know. What are we building? Right? Goes up to the next guy. Next guy goes, "Yeah, I'm building a wall," and guy's clearly competent, knows what he's talking about. I'm building a wall for this building. Okay, well, good. We're getting a little bit closer. And then the final guy, he goes up and he's busy, he's humming, he's working along, knows what he's doing. And he says, "Hey, excuse me, can you tell me what you're building here?" And he finishes what he's working on, turns to him and says, "Absolutely. So I'm building a cathedral to my God and a place of worship for my community." And it's like, wow, okay. And what we see is different levels of involvement. The guy that is can't basically, it's almost 5 o'clock. I'm just about off work. Don't bother me. For him, the day probably drags on like unbelievable, crazy, right? The other guy that's competent, does his job. He goes in there, he does it. He's good at what he does, and that's great. But there's one guy that he really knew his purpose. He knew what he was doing. He was taking extra effort to make sure that the walls were straight, that everything looked good, right? He's doing everything he can because it has a higher purpose. This is going to be a cathedral. It's going to be something that hopefully lasts for generations. It's something that his family and his community is going to be able to use. And so he's putting all of his effort into it. And for him, the day probably flies by just like that because he's into what he's doing. And so I think it's the same for all of us. When we have a purpose, when we're working, when we know what we're trying to achieve, it becomes easier. It helps keep us grounded. It helps us to go ahead and have direction in what we're doing.
So help me connect that to making my son do the dishwasher.
Do the dishwasher. Wow. So one of the things that I started realizing as I was like taking my wife's advice here and saying, "Hey, why can't you take the things that you're doing at work and use these to apply, at home?" And what I realized is that sometimes the purpose and why we're trying to do things, the chores, the different things that we're giving them, it just flies by them. Maybe it's the inconsistency of us, holding them accountable to do a task like the dishes. Maybe it is, we just weren't clear about why we're asking them to do something. So here's something where I took a principle from Agile, right? And they talk about stories. So when they're building out their tasks, they actually put a story behind it. So they use a format that's, as a something, I want something so that something. So it's basically, as you put it in context of the customer. So take the lean principle of, always looking at value from the perspective of the people that you're doing the work for. We would say something like, "Hey, instead of saying, guys, we need to clean up the house." Okay, yeah, sure. I'm going to take forever to do it. I'm going to, get it done. Or we could go ahead and say, "Hey, put up a card and say, as your grandpa, well, Okay, I know who I'm doing this for as grandpa, who's going to be arriving, in 2 hours. Okay, I've got a timeline, right? So I've time boxed it. You know, I want to be able to walk around without tripping on things. So my father had a stroke. He walks with a cane. If he trips, it could be bad, right? Yeah. In fact, he went to the high school for my son to speak about his experience in Vietnam. And while he was walking, he ended up tripping and fell down on the ground. Gets up, proceeds to do the hour-and-a-half class and answering questions and stuff like that. Afterwards, he says, "I need to go to the hospital." And he actually broke both of his arms. But he proceeded to, it's my dad.
Wow. Well, there's a man with purpose, right?
Yeah. So, he proceeded to, give the entire presentation, act like nothing was wrong. And then as soon as it was done and all the kids left, he's like, "Okay, I need to get to the hospital." And he was basically 2 months was, in cast and couldn't feed himself, couldn't do anything. So if we have purpose, if we, know what we're trying to do. So, knowing that we're doing it for grandpa, knowing why we're doing it, why grandpa needs that, and what the purpose is so that he doesn't trip, and he doesn't hurt himself. And so now the kids can go, "Oh, well, I can get behind that. I can go ahead and do that." Now, it'd be ridiculous to assume that you're going to do this for every task, for everything. But I think oftentimes I'm the parent, and because I say so, works when they're, 5, maybe when they're 10. By the time they're starting to become a teenager, the brain's starting to work, and they're like, no, that doesn't compute. That just because you say so, so what? So you do sometimes have to be a little bit more transparent with your kids. You have to let them know why you're doing things or why you're asking them to do things. And when you do, then there's a certain amount of respect, and they recognize that. And not saying they're going to do it every time, but more often than not, they're going to go, "Oh, okay, I can do that. I can get that done."
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
So you describe a circumstance, you are, the love you have for your family is evident throughout the book. So I don't want people to get the wrong idea, but there was one point where you wanted to ground your son for life.
Yeah.
You described
he must have been a teenager. Yeah, I think he was 15.
And so how did you use the power of why to avoid making decisions out of anger?
Yeah. That's a great question. I don't remember exactly why. Now that you said that, I do remember that, but I don't remember the why questions I started asking. But really, I did some self-reflection as I'm getting angry, right? And the old adage, count to 10. I mean, that works. Honestly, count to 10. One thing that I, early in my parenting, when the kids were, I think it was even before our second son was born, but it was like, I'm never going to go ahead and discipline immediately unless it is like, they're running out to the street or, something where they have
Danger.
To shocked into, do not pull this down because we're boiling water and there's a repercussion that you're not aware of and you don't want to be aware of, right? So I think there are a few situations where immediate correction and consequences are necessary for their own protection for later on. But apart from that, I've always believed I need to be able to sit down with them, discuss and explain why a punishment is going to take place. But that said, in this case, I started reflecting for myself. So, okay, why do I want to, ground them for life? And so as I started asking questions of myself, I was able to kind of, pull myself down off the ladder. That's in reference, and I forget what it's called. Might be like the ladder of assumption or something like that. But there's this thought that somebody does a reaction. We make an assumption about why they did something. And so we go up the ladder and then they do something else, or we keep on going up the ladder. And pretty soon it's like we're completely different levels and we're just getting all upset because of something that's going on here.
Is that the ladder of inference?
That is it. Yes, the ladder of inference. Yeah. And so when we make these inferences, when we make these assumptions, of course, we know what assumption stands for, right? It makes an act of you and me. But when we do that, it's not good. So as a parent, it's important to go ahead and make sure that we're in the right mind frame. And if we instantly start yelling at them, because there are times when you have the full story, you're like, oh, good job. I thought you were doing this, right? So you want to make sure you understand. And so in this case, he basically he'd gotten in a shouting match with my wife, his mom. And so we're just like, and he was very disrespectful, did not like that. That's not how I, raised him to be. Of course, he's a teenager, so, all bets are, but, so I started, asking myself, why? Okay, why am I upset? Why do I want to ground for life? What's going on? Why? And so I was able to kind of talk myself down from, grounding him for life. I still grounded him for life. And I said, that's okay. So he came back to me later. He said, okay, how can I get ungrounded? I was like, all right, well, it's funny you should ask. So I made him read a couple of business books around problem solving. And so actually it was one in particular. Ken Watanabe, I believe is his name. It's called Problem Solving 101. And it may be out of print. I don't know. It's awesome. He's a McKinsey consultant. And it basically takes kids through a couple of different solutions. Like, hey, you want to go to school, you want to start a lemonade stand, you want to do some things, and it's helping you to try to problem solve and figure out what's going to be the best option. And so I said, okay, you've got to go through this. And then I explained to him the Johary Window. Are you familiar with that one?
No. Can you say that again?
So the Johary, it stands for, I think it was like a Joseph and Harry. Don't know what their last names were, but they called the Johary Window. It puts on the X and the Y axis you and the other person, the other party. And then on the one extreme is things that you know, on the other extreme are things that you don't know. And so therefore you have basically 4 quadrants. There's things that you both know. There's things that only you know, but they don't know. And there's things that they know, but you don't know. And of course, there's things that you both don't know.
Neither one of you know. Yeah.
And so really a lot of misunderstandings happen because you're making assumptions based on just what you know, not knowing what the other person was aware of and what was happening. And so after he read this book, I made him and his mother sit down together, right? And you two are going to talk about that situation. You're going to fill each other in on this other box that you know, but they didn't know. And you're going to, see if you can then figure out, and maybe even start to fill in some of that, what you both don't know, or try to figure out, exactly what led to that situation. So at the end of it, pretty soon they're both laughing. At first they were laughing because, it's dad, forcing them to do lean. And this is like, can you believe this? So I became the bad guy. That's fine. And then they started laughing because they realized what had actually happened. The situation was she had asked him to go put something away. He'd gone on a camping trip. And so the tent was out in the garage. And so she wanted it, picked up. He had it out there to dry because, it's Northwest, it rains a lot. And it was dry. It was, he needed to put it away. But what she didn't know is the case to put the tent in was up in his room. So he was walking upstairs to go get it. She thought that was a sign of disrespect because the garage is in the other way. You're not going to go do that. You're hearing what I say, and then you turn your back on me, you walk away like I don't matter. And then from his perspective, it was like, well, how dare you go to that assumption? I was actually doing what you were wanting me to do. Well, not from her perspective. So this is where the whole fight, ended up starting. And so when they realized that, it was like, oh, and then he came, to the realization later, and this is pretty good for a 14, 15-year-old to actually say, you know what? I'm at fault. I could have avoided this entire situation and said, Mom, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go upstairs because the case for the tent is upstairs in my room. I'm going to go get that. I'll take care of that right now.
Yeah. Or even just an acknowledgement. I mean,
Yeah.
As a manager, you don't want your staff, after you ask them to do something, turning around and going in the opposite direction without them saying something. So it's a life skill, right? It's communicating,
It is.
it's an acknowledgement. It's a good lesson.
So that's really like, the things that I think, helps is we can't always assume as parents we're right. And, likewise, we have to start teaching problem solving to our kids. I mean, it's something they don't really teach in school. And a lot of the skills, a lot of the things that I've taught my kids through, some lean principles and some of the techniques. I mean, it's really benefited them, in high school, in their jobs, in their life. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. So here's the thing, though. Introducing lean into a family brings a lot of change. I mean, it is not only an effort to change the way we deal with things, but it's also an instrument for change itself. But are there common factors in the way people react at work when you try to get them to change to the way people in a family react to change? And what can we do about them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think change management is a piece that I think anybody that endeavors to become a problem solver, to really embrace lean, they also have to understand change management. So I have a section in the book, one of the chapters, where it talks about kind of, I think it's like the 10 most common reasons why change fails.
Yeah.
So without pulling out the book and looking at it, for me, the biggest one is you have to have transparency. You have to make it very clear what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how they're going to be involved and what's involved in the process. If you don't have that and you are a very, dictatorial, relationship with your kids, hey, this is the way it's done, I said so, do it, you're not going to have buy-in. They're not going to want to do it. They're going to rebel. Plus, honestly, if you think about it, if you have a boss that is constantly threatening you with, losing your job or firing you or something, I mean, it's not a pleasant environment to work in, right? Yeah. With a family, if you're constantly threatening, corporal punishment,
ground them for life, yeah,
grounding them for life, yeah, then it's like, why should I listen to you? Why should I, do that? I just have to put in my time before I graduate, get out of here, and then see it. So you don't want to have that happen either, for sure. But I think there's a lot of different things with change management, with making sure that you're involving people, that they're part of the solution, that they're incorporated in it, they know why it's happening. When you really have that respect for the individual by bringing them along in the journey of why you're doing things, then I think it's a little bit easier to make change stick. Yeah,
for sure. I think you're onto something there. They really have to understand why, which sort of brings me to the next question, actually, because my teenage son will certainly smell a rat if the purpose of this is to get him to do more and behave better. What's in it for him?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, really, they need to be self-sufficient individuals. And we see a lot of things now, just with, technology, with a lot of things that are happening in the world, as our transportation systems are getting better, right? There's fewer and fewer people learning to drive now because they don't have to.
Yeah.
So a lot of the responsibilities, a lot of the things that we had as kids, they don't have. When I grew up, even the yard and stuff that we had in Portland, the yards were huge compared to what we have now. I mean, now they're packing, houses practically touching each other. Luckily, we found this one community where we're not quite, reach out the window, touch your neighbor's window. It's a little bit more space, but still, it's pretty tightly crammed. We don't have a huge yard. We have a decent sized yard. But we used to have chores. We'd go out and mow the lawn. Now kids don't have a lot of chores to do because, parents do it for them. And they're not learning how to do things on their own. They're, again, parents, it's just quicker and faster and easier for me to do it. I'll just do it. Don't worry about it. Or we're putting them in so many different activities because we can, that they don't have a chance to play or to learn or to get those fundamental skills of what it means to actually work or to manage their own time and stuff, because doing everything for them. So what's in it for them? I think it goes back to that question I ask, all the people, what are you most proud of? And what they're most proud of is when they had a challenge, when they had something that they ended up accomplishing and learning. So if we are giving them opportunities to learn and to grow, then I think it really resonates with the kids. For example, I do workshops from time to time with parents and stuff, and they hear about the book and what I did. And hey, you got to fix the kids. Just wait. So we come in there. They're bringing their teenage kids, kicking and screaming. Basically, parents come in. Yeah, you got to fix them. You got to fix them. It's them, right? They're not realizing they have all these fingers pointing back at themselves. So as I start to go through the tools, as I start to go through and talk about these principles, as I start to do this, the kids go from this, with their arms folded and just to like, that was kind of interesting. Wait, that makes sense. Hey, if my parents did that, my life would be easier, right? So they start getting excited. Parents, on the other hand, they're going, well, wait a second, you're telling me I have to do work? Are you kidding me? It's them, isn't it? And they don't realize that sometimes the way that we react causes our kids to react a different way. Mm-hmm. They don't even see that. And so we have to be cognizant, aware of what we're doing, and then how our kids respond to how we're behaving as well. And so what's in it for them is they actually get excited. The kids come out, like, we're going to use this, and I'm going to make mom and dad do this because I see the value of using this tool and this tool and this tool. And it's really funny. And the parents kind of come out of there like, great, thanks. It's like, hey. Yeah. So no, it's and you make it fun. You make learning fun. So unfortunately it's black and white in the book, but the kids, the boys, cleaning the bathroom, I'd go in there and they're like, yeah, it's clean. I was like, okay, I see that you scrubbed the bowl, but I can tell from the sniff smell, you did the sniff test. You did not actually use any cleaning product on the toilet. No, I did. You just don't know what you're talking about, Dad. I was like, okay, all right, we're gonna fix this. So I end up stopping off at the pet store. I get a black light, come back, say, boys, come in here. Turn off the light so it's completely dark. Turn on the black light. Black light reveals all of the
horror show.
The horror show of what's in the bathroom. And they're like, ew, that's gross. Can I borrow that? So now it's like, okay, I want to see this clean where I don't see, streaks with the black light. I don't see spots. I don't see different things. And so now it's fun for them. So they actually would go ahead and like clean just the opportunity to use the black light to see if they had actually cleaned it. And so once we did that, I didn't have to like micromanage them or do anything, with getting them to clean the toilet anymore. They could do that for themselves. And it was very visual too, whether it was clean or not.
I like where you were headed in the midst of that. It's the payoff is that not just do I get a better kid, he's going to get a better dad. Right.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. That's awesome.
Yeah. I like the way you were sort of hinting at that in terms of, the way we react to our children is in part them, right? I mean, it's also partly us, but we can admit there's a relationship there. So if they make life easier, we can make life easier. So I think that may be how I approach this. So thanks for that. But nothing's ever easy. And as Seinfeld would say, you can't knock a Coke machine over in one go. You got to rock it. Okay. And so what is spontaneous recovery, and how will this impact my efforts to introduce lean into the home?
There's a good question. Yes. Okay. Thank you. So spontaneous recovery is something that happens, and in change management, it's one of the things I talked about. So you may come up with a better system, a better way of doing things as a family, right? A better way to do the laundry, a better way to do the dishes, whatever it happens to be. And it might be going along great for a day or two, week or two, but there's just something. We're habitual creatures, and so there's a habit, and so we may do something and even see the advantage of why something is better this way, but we will revert back to the way that we did it before, and so that could be behavioral. So if you're trying to change a behavior, you often see this with children as you're teaching them and to not always, but like to use the restroom, right? So they all of a sudden they don't need their diapers anymore, and then they decide one day, no, it was easier for me to have you change it. I don't have to go sit down on the toilet. Sure. It's like, you were doing so great. 3 weeks went by, and now all of a sudden you're back to this. What are you talking about? So it happens, and so being aware that happens is for a parent is key, or even for a manager, that you can have a backsliding to the way things were before. So spontaneous recovery, then understanding that happens, helps you not to overreact, but to go ahead and reframe, readjust, and help the kids or yourself to go ahead and get back on track.
Yeah, that's tough because you got to be patient a second time.
Yes.
So let's talk about a couple of the tools that you use in the lean family. And I just want to reassure everyone, you don't have to be skinny to do this. It's for the family that embraces lean. What is a family board?
What is family board? Yes. So it really comes off of, in production, you have shop floor boards. These are things where the team will get together in like a manufacturing plant or in the office setting, and they'll have a bunch of different things. So it'll have a capacity element to like who's in the office, who's out of the office, who's going to be doing what tasks, what project they're working on, how far along are they with the project. So there's a capacity element. I think of this in terms of your scheduling. So for the soccer moms, right? I need to drive them to soccer practice, and then I need to pick them up and take them back to band practice, and then I need to take them, to this or to that. And sometimes we have coordination issues, right? Where, well, you didn't tell me. Well, I thought you knew. It's like, no, you didn't share your schedule. So what I love about taking the things that we do at work and using it at home is there's some really cool elements. And really, I think I had it broken into there's like 5 sections of the board. So the first one is having that kind of that Kanban element of, here's all the things we need to do this week. And, these are the things I'm doing, and these are the things I've done. Now take this from a parent. How often have we come in and asked the kid before we even go and look to see if they unloaded the dishes, did you unload the dishes? Well, what that goes is a disrespect for the kid, because if they did it, they're going to feel like, dude, are you serious? If they didn't, it's like, what, you don't trust me that I'm going to do it? It's just like, oh yeah, completely forgot. Thanks. So having like chores and having things like that, and then getting them in the habit of going ahead and updating it. One, it's kind of, hey, I'm finished this. Now I can move it and I can, see that I'm done and, that. So when you set up a capacity board, when you set up a Kanban system of to do, doing, and done, now it's on me to go ahead and check that board and see if they've updated it, or to go to, the site of where, the dishes are, go to the kitchen and actually look and see before I say anything. Now, it's those little things that kind of help coordinate. So it helps coordinate with, driving the kids to their different activities. It helps coordinate with, chores at home. It really helps people to, get a better feel of things. The next thing I talk about is family values. And that's, you see it in corporations, right? You have your values statement. We believe these things. And I think it's important for a family to figure out what things they really care about, because that's going to drive their behaviors. That's going to drive the way that they do things. And you even see it in organizations. They might say they care about people, but if they're constantly yelling at their people, yeah, clearly they don't care about people. They care more about the money. Hey, I'm yelling at you because you didn't hit your goal. There was one organization I worked for, and this guy. So I saved my first year working at Daimler a little over $6.34 million. not bad, right?
That's good.
There was a purchasing agent that saved a little over $10 million. I get a pat on the back because I really didn't have a set target, but hey, $6 million is awesome. He ended up saving 10 million, but he was supposed to save 12 million. So he gets yelled at for not hitting the extra 2 million. So what do they really care about? Well, they care more about, in that particular department, they cared more about the bottom line and the money than they cared about the individual. And I'm not saying that was the entire organization. I'm saying with that particular management structure, that's what was relayed in how they treated him. It's like, are you kidding me? He ended up saving almost $4 million more than me, and yet he's getting yelled at. Are you kidding? And then when they asked, hey, do you want to go into purchasing? I was like, oh, no. Thanks anyway. So having those values help us to go ahead and reframe the children. So if, or even reframe ourselves, hey, you want to do this, but you want to do this, when you organize your values, when you know what's most important, you can go ahead and say, well, which one do you think we should do? If this is what we value, if this is what we care about. So having that kind of helps. The recognition piece of the board, kind of the Santa Claus list. Oh, this is awesome. This is motivation galore, where, give you a prime example, our son, older son, one day decided to help his younger brother with his math homework, just basically show him how smart he was.
Yeah, that was a beautiful story.
So he goes ahead and starts helping them. And we recognized that, and we went ahead and we put that up. So we all actually ended up putting up on the board independent of each other. So when you saw something, you'd write it up on the board. So we said, hey, great job at helping your brother, with his math. My wife said the same thing. My son even said the same thing. Hey, I really appreciated it when Andrew helped me with math. Guess what happened? He gets all these accolades for going ahead and doing something that we all noticed. He was like, oh, really? Yeah. So then guess what? The next day, he's asking his brother, hey, do you need any help with math? Yes. If I had asked him to please help your brother with math, he would have said, yeah, forget it. I'm not going to do it. But because we had identified the correct behavior, and we had all said, hey, that was amazing. Really appreciate the fact that you did that. He started doing that more and more to help his brother. Now, it didn't necessarily, continue forever, but for about a month and a half, 2 months, that was something that he, focused on, because he got praise for that. And it was something that was great. So the recognition board is awesome. Plus, I like then recording those things. So you can actually then go back and so if your kids, especially when they become a teenager, they're like, oh, I never do anything right, or they start feeling down. Are you kidding me? Look at this. Here's this whole list of things, right? It's like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, I did do that, didn't I? So it's a way to build them up. That's how often beautiful. And then at work, we had something, we called it like concerns and countermeasures, or we called it like problem, section or something like. I don't know, it's too negative. So I call it the opportunity section. So what do we do? What do we need to improve on as a family? What do we need to improve on with something that we notice something happen? And so you go ahead and you capture that and you write that down. And then basically you at the board, a couple things. You want it to be a safe zone, so you never get upset at anybody. They can actually come to you and tell you something, and you may want to get really upset, but you have to hold back. So that they feel like they can go ahead and share with you. And that's really what we want as parents. We want them to be able to, share things with us. So at the board, we never discipline the kids. We never, we get upset about it. We'll take a break and we might come back. Okay, we're going to meet back in about 15 minutes. But while we're at the board, we're going to have a definite break, so it's not immediately from the board to, discipline the kid. But, we want to go ahead and do that. So with the opportunity section, we go ahead, we assign one of the kids to go ahead or maybe ourselves or one of the kids to go ahead and take on, how do we improve this? And we give it to them as a task. And we don't necessarily spend the time doing that. The time at the board is usually like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, no more than 15. It's just really quick and simple. It's just something that, you every day just kind of, coordinate and work on what you're going to do. And the final piece is a goal section. It's kind of your KPIs, your key performance indicators. So what are the things that you're working on? and then you track those. So, in my case, I need to lose some weight. So, okay, that's going to be, the goal that I'm working on.
You're brave putting that on the family board.
That's all right. I need to, because they hold me accountable whether I'm doing it or not. So might as well put it out there.
Yeah. So can we use Kaizen in a family? What is Kaizen and how would it be applied in the lean parenting approach?
Yeah. So Kaizen is change. It's good. It's Japanese, two parts, two characters. Each character has a meaning. First part is change, and the second part is good, or can even be righteous, or so good change, righteous change. It's things that are good. And so it's in the context of how it's used in manufacturing, how it's used by the Japanese, it's kind of this idea of continuous change, always trying to become better, always trying to become good. And so, yeah, absolutely. We want to implement and get the kids constantly thinking about how to make improvements, how to go ahead and do things differently, how to go ahead and make things better. And so that's one of the things I talk about, I think, early on in the book is that we ended up doing a what do you call it, like a family focus group. Mm-hmm. It's a fun activity that we do. I brought home a bunch of magazines and I said, cut out all the cool pictures that you find in, here's some National Geographics, here's some just like some family magazines, here's some parenting magazines. Just go through and cut out all the pictures, any ad that you think is cool, whatever it is, just cut out a bunch of pictures. We spread those out on the table. And we say, pick 3 pictures that best describe our family today. Then they go ahead and do that. And then, you go around the room and you talk about what those 3 things, why you picked that picture. Here's the amazing thing. We did it. Our daughter was probably about 3. She did as good, if not a better job, explaining what she thought the family was based on those pictures than I have seen some adults do and doing the same activity at work. So it really does work at pretty much any age. If they can communicate, you can see why they picked the picture, because that helps tell part of the story. It's also a great way at work to trick people to go ahead and tell what's actually going on by picking, that's innocuous. That's a picture. But I'm not actually giving away any good information. So I'll pick this picture and then
I'm not criticizing my boss. Not at all.
That's right. Yeah. So I love that activity. It's a great activity. And so we did that. And then we put those pictures up on the board. And so there's our current state. Take a picture of that. Then we go ahead and we do the same thing. What do you want the family to be like? Pick 3 different pictures. And I picked this picture because of this. I think as a family, we should do more trips together. I think we should have more fun together. So they pick out these different things and they talk about it. Well, you can extrapolate that. That basically gives you your current state where you are to where you want to get to. And that shows you what you have to do to bridge that to get to the ideal state. And so then you can start to go ahead and take on this idea of Kaizen, or continuous process improvement, by saying, how do we then get from where we are to where we want to get to?
So I'm going to start drifting away from the book a little bit and talk about other things Jared related. Okay. and I want to pick up on Kaizen because, and I am interested in many things, but I'm a bit of a layman. I don't have any expertise. But when we talk about Kaizen, I associate that with Toyota or Honda. And one of the things we've seen is that both of these companies make amazing cars, but they make amazing cars that don't necessarily compete with Tesla. And Tesla is a step change, whereas Kaizen has created incremental improvements to things all the time. How in an organization can we reconcile between the need to focus on incremental little changes and stepping back far enough to see that a big change needs to happen?
That is a great question. It is, I think, one of the questions that ultimately plagues a lot of companies that go out of business. Like if you look from the 1930s, when the stock market crash happened, the Great Depression, there's very few companies that even exist today that were on the stock exchange at that point, right? And you can look at a number of companies that were, touted as, hey, this is a great company, and it's no longer in existence. I think there's an element of, it goes back to one of the lean principles, which is really, understanding the customer, providing value for the customer. And so from the standpoint of, our kids and our family, we need to be looking at it from, how do we provide value, to them? From, the work side, it's again, what value do we need to provide? What is the customer going to need or want? And how do we provide that? So there's a lot of tools, a lot of ways to get there. Innovation is a huge piece of trying to make those step changes that you're talking about. Design thinking is one way to get there, where you really understand the customer needs, and you can come up with products and services that you may not have even thought of as being a possibility, because you're focused on the customer. You're focused on what they value, what they need. I do mention a story in the book about my daughter, where, shortly after she was born, I'm sitting there holding her, just kind of like, thinking about the future. What here she is, this little petite little thing. And someday she's going to get married. Someday, we're going to have that, daddy-daughter dance. And then it was like, then I had this awful realization, well, crap, I could die in a car accident tomorrow, right? And I won't be there, so how do I make that special for her now? How do I, think long-term about the value of what she would want, and make that, impactful. So I had this idea. Every year for her birthday, I'll go ahead and I'll buy her, a white dress. I'll go ahead and put my tux on. We'll go ahead and have a dance, and I'll film that. And so if I end up making it that long, right, and I probably should, but if we do, it's going to be an amazing, daddy-daughter dance, and I'm doing this for my other daughter as well. So we do this dance, and so every time we turn, I'll just take the video, and it'll morph, and she'll be a year older. And of course, I stay the same age, but that's
yeah, exactly. You don't age at all. It's great.
No, it really is. I'm coming up on my 10th anniversary of my 39th birthday. It's
well
fantastic.
Done.
Yes, Jack Benny had it all figured out. So but so that's going to be awesome. If on the other hand something does happen, I've now still retained that, and that's something that the family can put together and take all those videos and do that for her as well, so I can still be there. That'd be special. So that idea never would have come about had I not have been thinking and asking the question, how can I make this special? How can I add value to her for this event, for this thing? And what can I do now to be able to make that impactful, 25, 30 years from now, right?
Right.
So that's
yeah, that's a beautiful story. I like that. Yeah. It's too late for me, and my son doesn't look good in white. So, so Jared, your credentials are crazy. It includes a master's in business administration, a Lean Bronze certification. You are certified Scrum Master and project management professional. You have 4 children. You have written a book and lectured on parenting the Lean way. You've launched your second virtual summit. You have a full-time job at the Seattle Port and an advisory position at the college.
Yeah.
Clearly, you are embracing the philosophy of Charles Darwin. I think I got this quote from your book, who said, "A man who dares to waste 1 hour of time has not discovered the value of life." Jared, how do you get it all done? Does Lean play a role in how you organize your personal life?
Yeah, although my wife would argue right now, because I'm getting ready for the summit, and she keeps on telling me I've bitten off more than I can chew. Just give you an example. So I don't know when this is going to air, but we're coming up July 19th through the 24th of 2021. I am doing a virtual summit. And so I've got speakers from around the world on every continent, except for Antarctica, that are going to be sharing their expertise about Lean. And so really excited about that. Last year I think I had 21 speakers. This year I'm going to have still kind of flushing out a couple of people, whether they're going to speak or not, but it looks like it's going to be either just above or just below 70. And so I'm coordinating all of that, putting it all together, creating all of the ads and stuff so people can share it on social media and things like that. And so she goes, you've just taken on way too much. I'm like, yeah, I would agree with you. In fact, this is on par with what a lot of associations will put on, like, AME or BTOS, or, some of these organizations will put on these big, huge summits and have about this many speakers. Of course, they charge $2,000 for that. I don't even charge. But anyway, so I said, well, they might have 24 people or a dozen people working on this, but it's just because I'm super efficient that I can go ahead and manage the exact same thing and probably about half the time. No, I don't know. But it does take a lot of, coordination. It does take a lot of systems. There are things that I have improved from last year. But then there are things that I'm realizing, oh, crud, I could have done this a little bit better. I could have done this in a different order, or I'm noticing I'm doing some rework here because I open up this document and I end up closing it. And then I have to, open it up again to extract the information to use it somewhere else. But I think lean does help because I am constantly asking, how can I do this better? How can I do it differently? What's going to be the best maximized use of my time? And more importantly, I think having those values are important too. So like Monday was the 5th of July, but here in the United States, we have the 4th of July. So it ended up being, the holiday, the day after, it's our Independence Day. And so the following day, we ended up having a national holiday. And I ended up, could have been working the entire time on just doing the summit and getting that taken care of. But instead, about halfway through, I said, you know what? Going ahead and spending time with the kids is going to be more important. I can take 2 hours out. I'm probably going to, regret it later. But no, I'm not going to get that time back. So, let's go out. Let's go do some things with the kids and let's make some memories. And so, for me, it was important to go ahead and take a break and do that. So, yeah. So
one of the other roles you play that I wanted to dig into a little bit, I realize that you work at the Port of Seattle. You may not be able to talk about everything that's going on there, but one of your roles is continuous process improvement program manager there. And I have to ask, with COVID going on, this must be an exciting and sometimes harrowing time to be at a port. How can lean play a role in getting our supply chains linked together again?
Wow, that's a great question. That really kind of goes into why I put on the summit last year. Last year, I was feeling a lot of emotions, right? Frustrated, sad, upset, probably more helpless than anything, because there were a lot of the things that we do in lean, a lot of the principles and the concepts and the tools and the models and things that we use, I know could help small businesses to bounce back, to really come out of these COVID lockdowns and be able to survive. And yet, how is I going to get that word out? And so that's really where the idea of doing the virtual summit came about, was because I figured, hey, let me get a bunch of lean people together. The theme last year was the Bounce Back Summit. It was all about what they would do in order to come back even stronger once they were able to open up again, and how to prepare for that so that, as a small business owner, you could really get your staff on board and you could start looking at things in a different perspective. Because let's face it, before COVID, you'd open up a door and you wouldn't think twice about it. After COVID or during COVID, you're afraid if you touch that door handle, you're going to somehow die. So, it's like, I
remember,
right. How do we go ahead and change the perspective of the customer, that they feel safe to be in our store? How do we make it easier for them? How do we, reduce the amount of touch points so that it reduces the chance of spreading the disease? So all of those things are things that come about because of, using lean principles, and you can go ahead and redesign your systems, redesign your processes, and be able to help them. So to answer your question for the port, we're doing a lot of things to go ahead and try to, improve, how we do things. At an airport, for example, you only have a certain number of gates, right? And so, because of COVID, let's face it, not a lot of people were flying. But after COVID, we're starting to see more and more flights come in, and yet we only have a certain number of gates. And so, how do we go ahead and maximize, space that we have on the gates? How do we maximize the use of that? Because different airlines might use the same gate. It's what we call a common use gate. So there's preferred gates where they, this is a Delta gate, or this is an Alaska gate, or a United, or whatever. But then there's other gates that they share. And so how do we make sure that, the below wing companies, the people that service the aircraft, are able to use that space in a way that's safe and efficient, and at the same time, once their airline that they're servicing leaves, that the next one's coming in, and maybe you have a different company coming in to service that aircraft. How do they make sure that they get their stuff in, quickly and efficiently, and do that? So that's like one of the projects I've been working on right now during COVID, is getting ready for that. And it's been perfect because it hasn't been as busy, so we've been able to have these conversations with them. So I think there's a lot of supply chain issues that are going on, and a lot of, I think, root causes behind that. So I think lean could be used to try to identify some of those. When you're paying your workers more to stay at home and get unemployment than what they make being at the job, it is going to be harder to get workers to come in. Yeah. And even if you raise the rate, then that drives up the cost of everything else. So which then the workers are almost worse off, because now inflation has hit, and their dollar value goes a lot, doesn't go as far as it used to. So there's a lot of things. I don't think I have like one particular answer I can give you, Tim.
No, that's fair. I mean, I know
trying to solve everything.
Well, there's it is an extremely challenging situation. And in fact, one of the things that is in the news is the impact of just-in-time parts delivery. I mean, we've got the chip shortage, which is, it's been on for so long now, you can't really blame just-in-time for it. But it was this idea that we were so accustomed to having perfectly functioning supply chains that we could not stock anything. We could build cars with parts that just arrived on a truck a minute ago.
Yeah.
And so people are beginning to criticize this idea that at least one component of lean, which is just in time. Do you think that's a fair criticism, or is it a once in a history thing and don't worry about it?
No, it's a good question. I think there is a certain amount of criticism for that, and I think there's some value to it. And it's not once in a lifetime thing. So when I was working at Daimler, there was a plant in, I want to say it was France. I could be mistaken, but they ended up having a fire. And this particular plant ended up making fuel hoses. And those fuel hoses went into trucks. They went into cars. In fact, the particular, it might not have even been the factory that made it. I think it might have been the company that produced the chemicals that they needed for that particular blend, right? And it's to keep the the gasolines from eating the hose, right? So there was only one factory that made this. That, and the supply chain is never good to have only one source of things. So that was mistake number one. And I don't think anyone ever looked at that because it was a tier 2, tier 3, supplier. It wasn't, the person they were buying from exactly. I think that was the case. And so what happened is all of a sudden when this fire happened and people realized that this basically, this one company that made the fuel hoses that everybody used got their supplies from this other, company, there was a huge run on what do you have left in stock, because it's going to take 6 months to a year to get back up and running. And we need, and really it was kind of going to, the volume of buy. So the big companies like Toyota and, Ford and some of these companies were able to buy it. We were a truck manufacturer, right? We don't make nearly as many, fuel lines or hoses, or need the same amount. So we were kind of on the bottom of the list as far as that went. So we were struggling to figure out, okay, how are we going to get this? What, is there something else we could use? And so that was back in, I want to say like 2011, maybe 2012. And so things like that have to come up. Now this is a completely different situation because workers, because of lockdown, haven't been in there. So because they're not in there, they're not making parts. And so now you start to have this interruption to the flow. That is unique. It's nothing that, I wouldn't say it couldn't have been planned for, because you can always, come up with scenarios, and you could probably have, pictured that this could have been an issue. I think there is a value to having a little bit of a surplus stock. We could get into the idea about just in time, where that saves a ton of money, because you're only paying for it when you need it. You don't have to have a huge reserve of parts. But I do think there is a buffer stock that it does make sense to have. But clearly in a case like what's going on here, even that buffer stock would not have helped very much. So, yeah.
So let me switch gears and ask you, as an author, what was the process that you went through writing and publishing the book?
Oh, wow. So I had the idea for a number of years and just kind of sat on it. Number one, never write a parenting book, because your spouse and your kids will use that against you. So FYI, if you're thinking—
Good note. Yeah, I'll scratch it off the list.
Yeah, just come up with another title, another genre. Yeah, no. But I thought it was kind of a good idea to put it out there. At some point, I'll probably do a second version where I'll take a lot more stories, not just like I had a few friends that implemented a few things, and so I included their stories. A lot of it was just kind of stories that I had. And since then, I've had a lot of new stories, right? So my son was working for a company, trying to get some experience in doing some multimedia design work and stuff like that, for a company that he had met at a farmer's market. And so he ended up implementing a bunch of techniques on how to prioritize, right? So using a pick chart, 2x2 metrics, right? And so he ended up showing them how to do that. He did it all, it was during COVID, so he did it all, using Mural. And so he set up the board, he showed them how to do it, and they were like so impressed with all these skills that he had gained, that they actually came to him and said, "Hey, we can't really pay you right now, but would you be interested in a percentage of the company?"
Wow.
And being, what was he? He was 16 turning 17, and having somebody, just because of, using some of these tools and these techniques, that's huge.
That's awesome.
Most people
has
can't
equity in
solve.
a company now.
Yeah. So, most people can't problem solve. And so to be able to go ahead and learn these tools, before you get into, high school, I mean, it's great. My son, both of them have figured out how to pay for college before they even got out of high school. And so, their goal is to graduate without having any debt or very little. And they're going to achieve it. I mean, my one son, he just now, he went out, put a bunch of flyers in the neighborhood and said, "Hey, I'll do any task. You tell me what it's worth, to pay. I just graduated, high school, getting ready to go off to college, trying to earn some money. Of course, any task within reason, legal. He did put—
I'm not going to move the body."
That's right. And so, there were so many people that just "Well, I don't have anything, but can you fold some laundries?" And then they gave him a huge tip. I mean, he came home one day and said, "Dad, I worked 10 hours a day. I made $750. Okay, so you're telling me you just made $75 an hour? I mean,
that's impressive.
I make some good money, but that's
yeah. So Jared, do you have advice for would-be authors other than don't write a parenting book?
Yeah. It starts with the first word, right? It's, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step, right? You have to go ahead and do it. You want to put together an outline first, just kind of okay, here's what I'm doing. In my case, it was something where I didn't have to do it sequentially, because I had that outline. I could hey, I feel really passionate about this, thing today. So I could write that chapter. Might have been towards the middle or the end. I think kind of saving the beginning and the end, sometime, depending on the type of book you're writing, for sure. Saving that for last to kind of put the finishing touches on it makes sense. Definitely get people to read it before you put it out. So that's number one. And what I mean by that is I shared it with a bunch of friends, and they all said, "Yeah, great." They gave me some, good recommendations, put it in the book. Fantastic. I had one person say, "No, I'm not going to give you a recommendation." I'm like, "What? I thought you liked me." It's I do, but I can't endorse this book. I'm like, "What?" Why? And they're like, this is a business book. You didn't talk about love. You didn't talk about, caring. You didn't talk about like anything. I'm like, holy crap, you're right. I mean, I'm so, what is that, left brain, right brain? I don't know, so focused on, hey, here's all these cool tools and how they're helping the family, that I didn't really put that message across. So I went back through, and it's like, I didn't use the word love once. Holy crap, and really that's what the family is all about, is love and care and working together. And so I ended up rewriting the book. I went back through and changed a bunch of the words. I went ahead and said, this is a little too clinical, and tried to put a little bit more, feeling and warmth to it. So definitely have other people read it, because, you get blinded by, hey, I'm focused on this. The other thing is get a really good editor. So in my case, my editor was awesome. She is my cousin. She is a former speechwriter for one of the presidents, and she was free. So
that's good.
That was awesome. But no, even if you have to pay for it, it's worth it, because I learned so much about writing. I thought, my grammar was decent. No, it's
not all the time, right?
No, and we talk a lot different than we write, or that we should write, right? So I would have these huge, long sentences that made sense when I said it, made absolutely no sense when you read it. And so she would break it down into a simple sentence, so that you could then go ahead and say what you really wanted to complete your thought or your idea. And so by breaking it into smaller sentences, it was like, wow, this reads better. It actually makes more sense. And so that, I think, is critical of any book you write, is that you have to have a good editor to take your ideas and help you to put it in and translate it into something that is legible and something that people can get a hold of.
Well, you succeeded. It's a terrific book, and this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm down to the last question. On top of all your other projects, you and your family recently moved. In fact, I think we can hear things being moved as we speak. Do you have any lean tips on making a move go smoothly?
Wow. Yeah. Don't do it. No. Well, don't do it on the hottest day of the year, and don't do it on the hottest day ever on record would be probably my first thing. So we ended up moving last Monday, which ended up being, I think we hit like 108 or 109 degrees here. Seattle, 8. Where we moved from, I think it got up to about 111, 110, 111. Just to give you contrast of how hot that is for the Pacific Northwest. That's just insane. I think it was, the hottest on record might have been 102, 103 before that. So it was at least 5 degrees hotter, which doesn't sound like a lot. But when you think that Miami, the hottest it ever got in Miami was 103 and we were 108. It is pretty hot. I think that's about 44 degrees or something like that, Celsius.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was really hot. And then it got so hot that one of our workers actually ended up, we had a moving company that we hired, and they ended up getting heat exhaustion. And so then the owner went ahead and basically called us and said, okay, we're done moving. It's like, okay, well, crap. We thought we were going to be able to move all this stuff, get it to the house, unload it into our new air conditioned house. So we have to leave it there. So they brought the one truck, parked it here. And then I got thinking about it. It's like, wait a second, I've got like family albums with, slides and negatives. I've got VHS tapes. I've got, cassette tapes that I recorded my grandparents on, things like that in this heat, they could melt. They could actually get ruined. So it was crap. So I ended up having to open up the moving truck and then start tunneling through everything, opening up all the boxes, pulling things out. So I spent about an hour, and it was easily 100. It was 20 degrees hotter in there. So it was probably 125, 130 degrees as I was working for an hour inside of this sweat box all the time, thinking people pay good money to go into a sauna. But and so I kind of felt good after I got out. And then probably about 15, 20 minutes after I got out, all of a sudden it just like, hit me, and I was basically out for the rest of the day. And combination of just constantly sleeping and drinking a ton of water and sweating and headache. And it was miserable. So yeah, don't ever do that. That didn't answer your question. Sorry.
Well, it explains why you're leaner.
Yeah, maybe I sweat it all out. So one of the things that we did is we coordinated the boxes. So we would put little stickers on them. So just for example, I don't know if you can kind of see that sticker there. So it's a little square, rectangular sticker. And what we did is we made it so that each room was color coordinated, and the floors were different shapes. So we had some circle stickers that went for all the rooms downstairs. For all the rooms upstairs here, we had these rectangular stickers. So as the people were unloading it, they didn't have to ask, well, okay, where's bedroom number 2, or John's bedroom, or this or that. It was this is rectangular. I'm going to go upstairs with this, or this is a circle. I'm taking it to the main floor.
Yeah.
And then we had outside of each one of the rooms, then a little sticker thing that or a piece of paper that had that sticker. So again, they could do it. Now, nothing ever goes smoothly. They did say that this was actually one of the easier moves that they've ever done, simply because it was color coordinated and they were able to move it. The one thing that we did notice is the stickers between my office and the kitchen. One was orange, one was kind of a reddish color, but out in the sun, very clear to tell which one was which. In the poor fluorescent LED lighting of the house, and it was by itself, it kind of both looked orangish. And so there were a few boxes that ended up in the wrong rooms that we didn't really notice until we started unpacking, going, well, wait, what are the utensils doing in my office? So over there. But for the most part, that went well. We went ahead, we mapped out all the furniture. So I actually did this comes from having worked 20 years in construction before I went and got my MBA. But I went ahead and took measurements of the entire house, and I converted that into a scale model and drew out all the rooms. And then I went ahead and took all of our major pieces of furniture, the beds, the bookshelf behind me. That's to figure out, I want to move this once, and I want them to put it in the right place so that I don't have to move it after they leave. And so we went ahead and we then cut out these little models. And so I had, I drawn out the house to scale, and then, use these little, cardboard models of the bed and the furniture, and moved it around until my wife was satisfied that she liked the way that it looked. And then we went ahead and drew out that picture and said, okay, this is where, all the furniture is going to go in there. So they appreciated that. They were able to put it right on the wall that we needed it, and it worked perfectly. So it takes a little bit of pre-planning. We were lucky enough that earlier this year, although I refer to it as December 44th of 2020, because I want to keep all the bad things in 2020.
Sure.
We had 160 foot spruce tree fall across our house. Cut the garage in half. A lot of things were destroyed, but luckily we were all safe. So that was the important thing. Lived in the Hilton Hotel for a month while we were trying to find another place to live. And then we had a temporary house, and we bought this house here. But from moving from the rental house that we had to the other rental house, the temporary rental house, we went through and did a lot of purging. And so unfortunately, because of COVID, they wouldn't take a lot of the furniture because it was, cloth furniture. And so they couldn't clean it. And so we literally ended up filling up an entire dump truck of things that just stuff that we really didn't need. It was like, so it was too bad we weren't able to donate some of that items, but it felt really good to get rid of a lot of that stuff. And it also felt good to go ahead and just start going, you know what, I haven't really used this in 10 years or haven't used this in 20. And so, we've been in the process of getting rid of a bunch of things and taking the time to, if you have that luxury of going ahead and really purging and minimizing, and in essence, 5S'ing what you have, right? Going ahead and saying, well, if I haven't used this, and I'm not going to use it, maybe it's not worth keeping.
Yeah.
Maybe because of the expense of it, maybe I will use it, every 5 years or 10 years. So maybe I just need to have kind of a drawer that I know that this is all of the stuff that I don't typically use, but it's put away. It's nice. I know where to find those things. And then it makes sense. But otherwise, it may be just cheaper to go ahead and, sell it, get rid of it. And then if you ever need it again, go buy it, versus having a room. Some people have this, and I know we've had this in the past, where there's a room that's kind of acts as the storage room. That's just like, hey, just go put it in there, and eventually we'll get to it. And, if you think about your mortgage costs and the square footage of that room, you're probably more than a storage unit just for having, stuff in your room or in your house. And so, yeah, minimize where you can, for sure.
Well, I'm going to stay tuned for yours and Marie Kondo's, decorating the lean way or something. We can get that to happen. This has been a terrific conversation, Jared. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Tim, I really appreciate it. It's been fun. My
guest today was Jared Thatcher. Jared's LinkedIn profile and information on where to get his book titled Parenting the Lean Way will be in the show notes. I'll also include a link to the Virtual Lean Summit webpage where you can register to discover lean business tips from over 70 now experts sharing their best practices for problem discovery and solving. Registration is free, and I am delighted to be one of the participants in this program. My name is Tim Hampton, and you can reach me at tim@unusuallywellinformed.com. Thanks for listening. I hope you will subscribe and join me for the next show with another unusually well-informed leader in business and technology.
Thank you for listening to the Unusually Well-Informed podcast.
The opinions expressed by the host and guests on the Unusually Well-Informed podcast are their own and do not reflect that of their employer or any other affiliation.